This is the Code to Cash podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Code to Cash podcast. This is your host Ajit, and we're continuing our series on deal desks with my friend and former colleague Dylan Rapaport, who is the VP of Deal Desk and Deal Strategy at Medallia. Welcome to the podcast, Dylan.
Thanks, Ajit. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Really happy to talk to you after a long while, and really excited to see all the growth that you've seen in your career. Would love to understand, how did you come across doing this role? And, talk to us a little bit about your career trajectory that has led you to this.
Sure. So I've been at Medallia for almost 12 years now. Started in the implementations team, helping configure the product for customers. Made a jump to solution consulting, so pre-sales, and then into professional services sales or a hybrid deal desk role, where at the end, towards the end of the sales cycle, when the customer says, I want to buy, how does it work and what is the pricing? That's where I would get involved, help with pricing, help with contracting, deal close, and then the transition to implementations. So I've been doing some form of that role for 8 years, with a small interruption to actually carry a bag as a quota-bearing rep. And now I lead our global deal desk and deal strategy team, helping reps close their deals.
Interesting. So when you were doing the functions where you were doing solution sales, or you were helping the deal cross the finish line, did the company have a deal desk team at that point? And was there any, what's the difference between these two roles? I'm trying to understand that.
For the first 5 years where I did that form of role, there was no formal deal desk. There wasn't even a formal sales ops team.
Okay.
And once we had that after 5 years, which is 7 years ago, the function got built out as a deal desk finance and compliance function.
Okay.
So it reported up through operations into the CRO at the time, but was very focused on accounting rules, finance compliance, data logging in CPQ. And they hired a bunch of people that were focused in that area.
Got it.
And there remained a role for what you called solution sales, which was the old name, of people that understood the product, helping drive that close with reps at the very end.
Yeah. Okay. What specific compliance requirements happen in a company's growth? I hear that a lot in some of the conversations. What is the requirement that then triggers the company to say, okay, now this is what we need to have, and that we don't have today. That's why we need to have these policies in place.
So when it first rolled out, it was driven by a deployment of CPQ. So when you have CPQ, the assumption was you also need to have a deal desk team making sure that whatever is logged in the CPQ system is accurate. And then ideal state, that data is flowing into accounting and finance and all of the other reports.
Right.
So you want a team validating the data.
Right. So that time you were still working with the team rather than leading the team, which was more recently.
Correct. And I wasn't even on the team. We were just a separate function.
Yes, separate function.
Circling, which actually was probably closer to what I call the deal strategy function.
Deal strategy function.
With deal desk doing compliance and data logging.
Okay. So I think that's a good place to start. How would you describe a difference between the deal strategy part of your role and the deal desk part of your role?
Okay. So deal desk is the data in CPQ accurate?
Okay.
Does the order form data match CPQ?
Okay.
And are the terms in the order form fully approved?
Okay. Got it.
Whatever approval policies you have.
Got it.
Deal strategy is, okay, so maybe we say we want annual net 30 terms on all of our contracts. Deal strategy is, well, if we have a 40% discount on this deal and they're asking for net 45, and maybe they need some special cash payment terms, how do we navigate that with the customer to get to the optimal outcome for both parties? Deal strategy is coaching the reps around that. So taking an intimate understanding of the terms and the desired outcomes for Medallia, and then coming up with positioning, and often sometimes joining sales deals to discuss with procurement those terms from sort of a finance angle.
Got it. So sort of like there's an inward facing part of the function, and there is a sales facing part of the function that you're helping actually close, like compliance as well as closure. Interesting. And so now that you run this function, how do you sort of organize a roadmap for the function? I'm guessing there are metrics that you have to deliver or be accountable for on both ends, right? So I'm curious, how do you structure your function such that you're able, like, what sort of processes do you run that other deal desk leaders can learn from about how they can run a function like this on both ends?
So ultimately, our mission is to serve as a concierge service to field sellers to create a frictionless sales cycle for both seller and customer. And our ultimate metric is the sales team, because we roll up to the CRO, hitting the global number.
Got it.
Off of that, secondary metrics are to ensure that as many contracts as possible adhere to the target terms that we want as a company. And then kind of localized metrics for the individuals are turning around order forms as quickly as possible, getting deals out the door. Time kills all deals being the classic mantra.
Makes sense. So what percentage of deals do you actually have to support in a sort of deal desk capacity?
100%.
100%. Okay.
100% of deals.
So when you say concierge function, you literally mean high touch, white glove service for all deals?
On every single deal.
Okay. I think this is an interesting thing just for anybody who's listening to the podcast, because I did a call with senior director of deal desk, leader of deal desk at LinkedIn, just prior call, and they had a very different way of doing this. But I think what probably drives this is the type of deals you're selling, right? Because as I recall, Medallia sells huge deals, giant deals, which require a lot of this hand holding. But is that still true? Is there, like, does Medallia also do SMB or other smaller deals?
We have a small amount of SMB, but the focus is Fortune 1000, Fortune 5000, giant multi-year contracts with total contract values well and above seven figures. So those types of deals are not.
Yeah.
It's less about automated processing and more about that personalized touch, which is why we have a team that can engage directly with the customer.
Understood. Interesting. So let's say for a second, Dylan, assume that you were not doing this role, and there's either Medallia or some other company. They are in this sort of setup, right? They have this really complex deal structure, large deals, and they want to have a function like this that reports to the CRO that helps selling happen and understands the nuances. What skill set should a CRO look for in the head of this role to execute this way, especially if they're coming, not like you, who's been an insider for a long time?
So they need to have carried a bag. They need some amount of sales experience, because you have to have an understanding of the financial terms and the metrics that you want the business to hit. But it's critical to transform those into positioning with a customer. You need a why. You can't just say our policy is annual net 30 because that's our policy. That's our policy because we're buying other technology up front to get you the cheapest price, and we need to fund that so we can pass that savings on to you. Yeah. So carrying a bag gives you that instinct of positioning. And then I've used the position and the role to create sort of a feeder system. So if reps want more experience with the back end of cycles and end negotiation, they can join deal desk deal strategy for a time and then go back out in the field. Likewise, taking people out of college or folks that want to come from diverse backgrounds. We have a former like SDR, BDR. I've got a 6th grade teacher. Folks that had no tech background but were hungry for entry into SaaS. Right. They come in, they learn the terms, they start experiencing a high volume of end close negotiation cycles, and then we can roll them back out into the field as sellers. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a very interesting sort of career path there. And I actually got this question from someone yesterday. They are sort of a senior deal desk person, like the only deal desk person at a smaller startup. They're like, the question was, so my first question was, how do you hire for the role, right? The next question is, for a smaller company, let's say somebody is in deal desk, what career paths do you think it opens up for them as the next things that they can look into?
So I touched on hiring, but I tend to go for hungry individuals that are looking
Yeah.
to learn more
Yeah.
than a specific background.
Yeah.
The actual data entry part, even the negotiation strategy, that can all be taught and coached.
Yeah.
But you just need someone that's open to learning, and it's also comfortable with being in the middle of a bunch of different parties all pulling in different directions, because you sit in the middle of balancing, like wanting to help the sales rep hit their number, but also balancing the company's needs from a finance perspective. So we're often representing the unrepresented party in any discussion about a deal. And then from career path, I think going out into a sales role is a path, and I have a couple people that are looking at that. Ones that want to move more towards the finance or revenue operations or systems roles. You touch so many parts of a business in Deal Desk that you can actually hop out to any part realistically.
Makes sense. Interesting. So I remember there used to be, around 10, 11 years ago, there was, I believe Ben Horowitz or Mark Anderson, one of them had written an article on good product manager, bad product manager. It used to be one of the most common articles we used to read when thinking of becoming PMs. And it would say, okay, this is what a good PM does, this is what a bad PM does. So if I ask you the same question around Deal Desk, right? If you were to describe a good Deal Desk function, what are the characteristics? How do they operate? What outcomes do they create versus a bad Deal Desk team? How would you sort of, take a stab at maybe 5 bullet points each for both?
Well, it's easier to start with the bad and then merge to the good.
Let's do that. Yes.
So I don't know if there are various jokes about Deal Desk out in the marketplace, but a classic one is the "don't do deals desk" is the running joke, that Deal Desk is a blocker. I'm going to alternate between good and bad here. A driver for that can often be because the team doesn't have empathy for the sellers. Taking on a quota is a high stress, difficult job. And when you have particularly when you're talking like a 7-figure enterprise deal that's taken 18 months, 24 months to get to this point, and then you're discussing terms and specific pricing with Deal Desk, you can't take an attitude of, well, this is just the policy, so we're not going to even discuss it. At a minimum, if you're presenting policy, you've got to justify the why and arm the rep to go back and even offer to join the customer conversations, and maybe even play bad cop on that cycle, so that the ire hits you. So those are kind of gone back and forth between the good and the bad. But you want to have that empathy, and you want to minimize.
So first is don't be a blocker to say, and which I actually have seen. Like I have seen some people in Deal Desks. I've literally seen on their table a sign saying no, not today. So that is not a joke. Like I won't name the person or the company, but I've seen that. What other things come to mind for you?
You want to have the team move with urgency. You want them to feel as if they are embedded with the field. So rather than having a ticketing process where deals come in and they just get picked up round robin, the team is assigned to sales leaders, and they're joining their QBRs, and they're joining their team meetings, and they're actually even helping to cascade out information about best practices and sharing that day to day. So they feel like they're part of the sales team. They're celebrated. The team in Medallia was actually awarded the MVP team at the recent SCO, which is a far cry from the don't do deals desk mentality.
Congrats on that. Yeah, that's awesome. What other things come to mind? And I'm actually curious a little bit, don't want to seed the thing, but I'm curious on the topic of economics. Sometimes there's a lot of considerations around let's say margin, or there are finance considerations, and then there's conveying that into the cycle. And sometimes I've dealt with Deal Desks that are a little bit like, this is the discount, and that is what it is, and don't talk to me beyond that. So I'm curious about what you think, how a good versus bad Deal Desk function handles that topic.
So we freed up the team to empowering the front line is very important. So we have a set of policies that say, net 30 annual, certain amount of discount threshold. There's 20 of them. And then there's a frontline approver, which is often just the frontline Deal Desk person and a threshold up to what they can approve. And then just a second level of anything up beyond this goes to our executive committee. So first, that allows us to look at a deal saying, the disc, because all of those terms are interdependent, and you can't say, well, it's just violating this one part of the policy, so therefore it needs to go for approval. So we let the frontline make a lot of the decisions if they can justify that, well, we need net 60 here, but everything else about this deal is great. We'll often let them push that through without additional approvals. If they want a consult, or if kind of the deal has a lot of problematic terms, we actually have a weekly meeting with our CFO, CPO, head of client success, and CRO and CEO, where we go over rapid fire the deal exceptions, and they're discussed at an executive level. So it's not, there's no email approvals, or basically no online process that's run by. You get 4 or 5 deals a week. Most of those go through with some adjustments, and it gives the executives a very good sense of where the market pushback is on terms and deal economics and margin, so that they can then drive other decisions with their business. So a recent one has been one of our products. Every single deal was triggering the discount approvals, and it's created a discussion of COGS, margins, and target pricing for that product between the CFO and the CPO, because we were able to bubble that up directly to them on a weekly cadence.
Awesome. Is there a component about deal desk knowledge on the product themselves being important?
It's something I struggle with, because while I have a product background at Medallia, most of the team does not. They don't. It's not that the deal desk needs to understand all of the intricacies of the product, but you should understand at a basic level what products you're selling, what their prices are, and what they do, and the value that they provide to the end customer. And also, whatever the selling metric is, you need to understand that in depth, because you'll often be called into customer conversations to explain what that metric is.
Got it. That completely makes sense. You need to understand at least the pricing very well and how the product is priced.
Yep.
Sometimes there is, in companies, there'll be a roadmap, and the roadmap is often confused with the product. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen at Medallia long ago, but I've also seen that happen in other companies where my reps have basically sold fiction. And so is that something you are also checking when a contract is coming in? Like, are you selling real goods, or are you selling shelfware?
So that was actually a shift that we made for exactly that reason. All proposals to a customer, so all pricing has to go to a customer as an approved order form. So yes, you can send slides or emails to accompany it, but it has to have an approved order form behind it. And that prevents any product or feature that is not generally available from going to a customer.
Okay, so you're saying initially you can send slides or something, but the order...
No, if you send slides, you have to send the order form with it. You have to have an order form behind it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So an approved order form. So you cannot... So how... I guess if someone is discussing, so they know this ahead of time, so they don't make the wrong moves. But that also means it creates front loads work for a seller, right? Because now, as a seller, I can't just ballpark pricing with you or put anything on paper, essentially, until a later date.
Yes, but if you have a deal desk that's aligned to the field, accessible via Slack, and is turning around an order form within a day, it's not actually blocking the field sellers. And we found that actually handing a prospect an executable order form with an expiration date accelerates the cycles, because it makes it real. And a business stakeholder that might not know how to navigate the process and might just be exploring things is then forced to bring in legal procurement and make the process more official.
Makes sense. Okay, so I'm coming to a part of this podcast which I really enjoy. It is you tell me 1 or 2 examples of war stories of really weird or complex deals that you may have closed that had a lot of components, a lot of moving parts, and something crazy, just for people to understand what can go into an enterprise deal, and also what is the behind the scenes work that has to happen to make it close.
I'll have to anonymize this.
Yes,
as I'm just thinking how to tell it. So a company approached us asking to displace a competitor, and they had a very set budget, but they wanted an offering that we had, but they wanted it to be unlimited, which is not something that most companies want to do. And rather than conducting a sales cycle, this was all procurement driven on their side. We actually had deal desk. I joined the conversation with procurement one-on-one and negotiated from just a pure finance perspective the deal. So not value, anything else. It was just like, we assume you and your competitor are about equivalent. Can we get to the terms and contract that makes sense for us? And it involved a long free period, unlimited software, which had to come with caveats in order to protect us on the cost and margin side. And that essentially goes straight to the executives, becomes a long debate as to the risk of taking that on. And then there was another added component of professional services coming in. So all of their deploying enterprise SaaS is complex. You're talking about sometimes 500,000, 2,000 hour implementations. So then when you don't have any details from the customer or the prospect, what they're going to build, how do you then deploy a professional services package that gives them flexibility to deploy what they want, but doesn't lock them into any particular costs? In that particular example, we ended up using time and materials with a 0% deposit, so that the customer can pay as they go.
Yeah, makes sense. So that's I guess non-standard because of this whole unlimited nature. What did it also take more time than other deals to close?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other example here that like you that comes to mind for you, as you look back in terms of complexity?
Dig deep. It's actually over the last couple of years, we've become a lot more standard. And that's partially because of bringing the deal desk earlier in the cycle. If we're helping with the initial proposal, it doesn't get out of hand. In years past, you would, because the reps are trying to juggle keeping the customer and the prospect engaged with the sales cycle. So they're often, the worst line you can say when procurement asks, I ask, can we do X, is to say, I'll go check on it, rather than immediately saying, no, that's not, we can't do that, and here's why. As soon as you open that door to checking on it, you end up in a difficult position.
Makes sense. And so one of the things you mentioned is that you were reporting to the CRO. Is there any sort of friction that ever happens with like the finance organization? Because some companies I talk to, the deal desk reports to the CFO, and so the CRO doesn't have much control. I'm curious what the dynamics are, and how often is there what are the type of things that require a debate to then happen, or some deliberation to happen between these teams?
So at Medallia, it's been a pendulum. It started under CRO, moved to CFO, and then moved back to the CRO function.
Okay, so I'm curious about the reasons for that.
I think mostly politics at the time, but the original function, the function was invented by an operations team that rolled up to the CRO. Okay, and when that org changed, then the CFO at the time said, "I want control over this. This is a compliance function, not a revenue function." Yeah. Then it was recognized later that we needed that revenue and guidance function, and it was moved back.
How would you do your job differently? I guess is my question. Like, if you today changed hypothetically and reported to the CFO, devoid of politics, how do you think you would have to change what you do?
I wouldn't recommend doing anything differently. You have to stay connected and engaged with both. And I think of myself as dotted line with the CFO and have one-on-ones with him, but the challenge with being under the CFO org is that the sellers can see you more as a blocker. When you're in the CRO org, they believe that you're in the camp with them, but then you don't, like the deal doesn't have a quota component, right? Because that would be a direct conflict of interest. But you're able to say, I'm in the boat with you. I want to hit the number that's success for our team. But we need to do X, Y, and Z because of A, B, C reasons.
Right.
So
got it.
And the key has been, and I think I don't know if this is common at other companies, it was something implemented by the last CEO, is that weekly deal review meeting with the executives, because the CRO and CFO sit there and they see us trying to balance both sides, and that it creates trust from the executives so that they trust the frontline deal desk to make the right decisions on deals. Because ultimately, even with the higher value, lower volume deals that we're doing, if you don't empower and trust the front line, you're going to have problems.
I had a question around approval velocity, like the time taken for approvals. If you escalate into requiring executive level approvals beyond what you are authorized or what the sellers are authorized, is that something that you had to grapple with as, the variability from the executive side or somebody more senior?
So it's also something that's evolved here over time. It used to be that 90% of deals would have to go to someone in the C-suite for approval. And you would just have deals sometimes taking weeks to get approved.
Exactly.
So we've gotten it down to, it's probably 10% or less of total deal volume has to go up for executive approval. You've got that weekly cadence, so there's a forcing function every week to go through, and I think we've gotten through as many as 10 deals in 30 minutes. So it's very rapid fire. And then because of that, you know how to engage with the executives, and if something needs to be approved off cycle because it's more urgent, email, and you get almost immediate responses from them.
Makes sense.
But it is, we did eliminate the idea of, well, person A approves X term and person B approves Y term. Instead, because you have to look at the deal holistically. You can't approve net 90 in a silo if you don't understand the deal is highly profitable, or it's a 5-year committed deal. Or this particular customer is already doing a bunch of business with us and they need this payment term just for this particular reason.
Correct. Makes sense. Yeah, that's one reason I asked you the question, because in multiple companies I've observed this deal delay problem where executives want to approve everything and it really delays sellers, and then sellers try to change terms on their end so that they never have to deal with executives, creating like a sort of weird feedback loop. So I'm curious, was this an obvious realization at the company, or did certain things manifest where you realized, okay, I think we need to stop doing this because XYZ weird things are happening?
I was helped by good executives. We had a new CFO come in, getting bombarded with approval emails, and said, I have to do my day job. And I trust the field. And what we do is we report out, like we can report out easily because all the data is in CPQ that says, here's where we're trending on payment terms or on margin. And if it gets worse, then we can tighten the term approvals. But if we're tracking well, you should give the field as much freedom to operate as quickly as they can.
Yep. Okay, so coming to the close, my final question is more on the role of technology. So there's a lot of talk of AI in the last 2 years. Is there any role of AI in this whole function? And if so, is there something where you'd like to see AI applied to your current function, or maybe having some place where it can help your team?
That's interesting. For lower dollar, higher value deals, I could see AI particularly helping with order form red lines and order form terms, which today is still pretty manual with CPQ and the other tools that we have. With low volume, high value contracts, it seems like a human will always be needed to assess. Maybe that's just old school.
Makes sense. Completely.
But CPQ tools themselves could always use improvement, because today at Medallia, the deal desk logs every deal in CPQ ourselves. We don't have the sellers enabled to do it. And that can...
Interesting. So sellers don't use CPQ at Medallia. I guess
no,
we have low volume.
Yeah, we've tried for years, but if a seller is only going to go into CPQ 5 times a year, you're never going to master the nuances of a deal.
Interesting. Okay, awesome. How long, I would say, my final question is, how long would your team take to work on a quote, right? Like, what is the time taken for an average deal?
Request gets submitted, and we typically have the order form out the same day. then
I'm curious about the systems aspect, like how much time does
within the system,
to work the system today?
because we're doing multiple a day and you
Mhm.
become a master of the system, it's
Mhm.
typically only taking 15-20 minutes to get
Makes
everything logged and order from out.
Awesome. Makes sense. Well, those were most of my questions, Dylan. They were awesome conversation. Is there anything I should have asked that I missed that's on your top of your mind?
I don't think so. I think you
Okay.
covered everything.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on. I'm going to stop recording. Appreciate your time.